G'day everyone, my name is Jace, and I just want to welcome you to this new KSP Career series that I'm starting up. I've been wanting to throw something like this together for a little while now, basically doing a career series where we're going to be moving out into the Kerbal system, doing a bunch of science and exploration, but then also setting up some long-term habitation in there with life support mods and limitations and stuff on that. And if all that doesn't sound like enough, once we've gone around and colonized all sorts of planets and other celestial bodies within the Kerbal system, we are going to go interstellar, travel to other star systems, and do it all again. So if all that sounds like something you're interested in, then please, by all means, stick around. I'm sort of aiming to keep the pace of this series a little bit sort of fast and fun. If you've ever seen this spaceship before, then yeah, you know what I'm talking about. This little thing, we've all launched it 1,000 times, and early career saves are not really the most interesting thing to watch. I'm going to skip to a point in the series where I thought things started to get a little bit more interesting. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now and let the intro play. I'll be back with you afterwards to yap about whatever nonsense comes to my mind. In the meantime, hope you enjoy. Oh man, I've been talking about doing this series for years, like literally years, before KSP2 was announced. Which obviously, anyway, we won't talk about that. But here we are, playing Kerbal Space Program 1, the OG, the original. I have a heavily modified save. When I say heavily, I mean I've installed over 120 mods. If you've ever modded Kerbal Space Program or had a look around on CCAN or any sort of like mod pages, you'd be familiar with a lot of these. They're very kind of like the main standard for quality of mods. If you haven't and you're kind of new to Kerbal Space Program and checking out this series for the first time, don't worry. I'm going to try and explain what I've got, what they're doing, and why they're there, so you're not completely left in the lurch. But yeah, we got a whole host of really high quality, like part mods, quality of life changes, obviously graphic visuals. I mean, look at these volumetric clouds, man. Blackrak's Patreon, if you haven't already subscribed to him and you're a Kerbal Space Program player, I highly, highly recommend. It just changes the game. We're obviously using a little bit of MechJeb for some easy assists and stuff as the career progresses and we unlock some more modules. Then we'll get a little bit, speaking of MechJeb, a little bit of a glitch with Smart Ass there. I suppose I should start by talking about what's actually on your screen. Here I am doing a mission, a little bit of a commercial contract, a satellite launch for, I believe it was PRSC Rocket Supplies Company, which is why the name of the mission is actually PRSC Alpha. Nice little commercial satellite bus that I built here. I've used this one a couple of times. It's just a simple throw together, one size fits all for any sort of satellite contracts, which I actually ended up doing a whole lot of early on in the career save to get that early influx of cash, which is very important because of the setup that I've got going, which I'll talk about in a moment, because we have just reached an orbit and the mission's come to an end. We'll jump across to the next one. So as I was quickly saying before, I was rudely interrupted by the transition there. I've got the fund rewards and science rewards set a little bit lower, I think about 60 to 80% from memory in the difficulty options. And the reason for that is that when I was starting out the save, as I spoke about in the intro, I didn't want to be launching the capsule on top of the Flea solid rocket booster with 3 mystery goos, 1 mystery goo for the launch pad, 1 for when you're flying through the air, and 1 for when you splash down on the ground. I wasn't interested in doing that sort of early, boring kind of gameplay loop. So what I went for was actually in a kind of a faster start. I started with about 500,000 sort of funds and a little bit of extra science so that I could get some early tech tree nodes. And what you're actually seeing here is about the 4th or 5th mission I did during the career. I skipped some of the earlier ones because they were quite boring. And now we're doing some more less boring missions, such as doing these commercial satellites. Speaking of this one here, this is a launch I did, I think, for Zaltonic Electrics. I think my memory is serving me correctly. The name of the mission was ZE 2001, because ZE 1001 ended up a fireball, I believe. Didn't have enough Delta V to reach orbit and ultimately ended up burning up on re-entry. So that was not fun. So yeah, as I said, I did a few small contract missions early on. I have got a couple of really critical mods that I want to talk about very quickly. The main one being the Kerbal construction timer. So essentially what that is when I'm building rockets in the vehicle assembly building, once I click launch on them, they don't immediately roll out to the launch pad. They have a construction time, depending on the complexity of the parts and how many points I put into the systems and stuff like that, and how many snacks I'm willing to part with for the engineering team down in the vehicle assembly bay. There's a little incentive to work a bit faster, but yeah, it could take like a very long time. And this is going to be a massive thing that comes into play a little bit later on, because if I don't have proper careful planning and, you know, set up redundancies and things like that, there's going to be the chance that a lot of these missions do actually fail. And without proper rescue missions or a backup plan set in place, it could end in disaster. And I'm playing without the revert option. I'm saying without the revert option. It's still there in case of deep space Kraken attacks, but I'm trying very hard to, yeah, do all these missions in a single take. So especially considering I've got Kerbalism installed, which is another big mod that adds a whole host of things. But one thing that's relevant is that it adds random system failures. So the parts that I use, the engines, the electronics and stuff like that, they have a random chance to fail. And that in combination with the Kerbal construction timer makes for a very interesting setup where mission plans need to be very carefully and meticulously crafted. And, you know, if there's any failures, I need to have redundancies planned. It just makes it very interesting. I'm very much enjoying this style of gameplay. I still make all sorts of horrible mistakes, which we'll see a couple of those coming up pretty shortly. But yeah, obviously we're dealing with probes right now. Once we start dealing with crewed missions, the whole paradigm is going to shift. And speaking of crewed missions, we are rapidly approaching the launch of Aeros 1. So you can see in the construction queue here, I've got a bunch of craft. Aeros 1's already been constructed. It's now just ready to launch. And here we have Jebediah Kerman doing our first crewed launch of the save. Oh, good old Jeb. I'm sure you're all familiar with him. He's the star of the show. What I am going to be doing in this series actually is I'm going to try and let these, you know, the classic Jeb, Bob, Bill, Valentina, I'm going to let them take a little bit of a backseat. I did use them a bit earlier on, but just to keep things interesting, I'm going to try and, you know, take some suggestions for Kerbal names from you guys in the comments. I thought that'd be quite an interesting kind of engagement thing. So if you have any cool ideas for Kerbals you want to see in the series, then please drop them below. But yeah, here we have Aeros 1. Aeros is going to be the name of my crewed spaceflight program. I think that there's a couple of launches that I've done on Aeros, specifically going into just Low Kerbin Orbit and doing operations there. This is looking like a very high angle of attack on this launch. Not sure what I was thinking here, maybe distracted. Either way, we're going for a bit of a slightly inclined orbit. I didn't want to just go equatorial for my first manned mission. So yeah, while Jeb does what he does best, I'll talk a little bit more about the mods that I've got installed. I mentioned Kerbalism earlier. Kerbalism's a really incredible mod. You can see this little grey panel on the top right. I'm sure people, if you've played Kerbal before, you're familiar with Kerbalism. If you haven't, it overhauls a whole bunch of stuff. It makes the science collection a lot more interesting, in my opinion. It makes it so that when you're doing your science experiments, they don't just complete instantly and you get the science and you need to cart that or transmit it back. Your science will actually take time to complete. It has like a sort of an experiment timer. And if you get interrupted while during this timer, you actually maintain your progress. So you can sort of do science in Low Kerbin Orbit over multiple launches and collect all the stuff that you need. And yeah, in this case, we're going to be sending Jeb into space for about 2 hours. Collect as much information, onboard telemetry, you know, systems testing. He's going to check out this, frankly, ugly, hideous spacesuit. Not sure what's going on with that. We might need to take that back to the tailors, the designers, see if they can come up with a solution. I did try to do some EVA science, unfortunately. Didn't have the inventory capacity, but yeah. He gets back in, and then I think he's going to do a couple of loops. But yeah, Kerbalism. Interesting. What else have we got? We got a bunch of stuff. We got a whole lot of the near future suite by Nerty. I mean, yeah, straight up, these just add high quality parts, near future technologies. We've also got far future technologies, also by Nerty, to give us that kind of cutting edge and distant science fiction sort of propulsion solutions, which we're going to need very high efficiency, long burn time engines to, you know, eventually make our travel within the Kerbal system and then beyond a lot more feasible. In terms of the goals for this sort of series, I did speak a little bit about it in the intro, but I wanted to kind of reiterate. We're sort of aiming to do a lot of like colonization efforts early on, hoping to kind of set some early stretch goals for our sort of space company, and I guess the shareholders and the sort of canon in my head for the reason of doing all these contracts. Another smart ASS here has been really playing a lot of funny buggers with me. You'll see a couple of times throughout the next few launches, especially when the kill rotation and node modes don't really seem to work very well. Here we have the probe. Sorry, not the probe. We have Jebediah re-entering the atmosphere. But yeah, the kind of stretch goals for the early parts of the career, I really want to kind of set these goals now and then kind of work towards them, and we can kind of tick them off as we go. Setting up a kind of a system where we're going to be proving the feasibility of long-term habitation in space, and that's going to be really important if we're going to be then eventually moving to, you know, sending people on multiple year missions to the other planets and celestial bodies within the Kerbal system. I do have the Outer Planets mod installed, so some of those travel times and, you know, transfer windows and stuff can mean that they're going to be many years, probably even permanent or near permanent establishment of habitation. And right now we can see Jeb is on his way down to a gentle splashdown in the ocean. Our first crewed mission looking like a success. Although another onboard sort of hiccup with the attitude control systems didn't prove for a very comfortable re-entry. But no worries for poor old Jeb. And with that, we cut across to the recovery screen. A couple of mystery goo reports and stuff that we recovered from that one. And yeah. Moving across. So I believe the next set of missions that we're going to be doing are specifically for ScanSat, which is another mod that I've got installed. Classic mod, this one again, which is essentially enabling us the capability to use onboard scanners on our satellites to map and scan the surfaces of celestial bodies as we orbit them. I believe we're coming across to KOS, which stands for Kerbin Observational Satellite. Using observation within the visible light band to scan the surface for biome information. Eventually, later on, once we get higher technology, better scanning equipment, we'll be able to see resource deposits and distribution of resources within the surface of the planets, which we can use to inform ourselves when we're looking for base building locations and colonization. Here's me trying to learn how to use the camera tools mod at this point. I have since had a bit of a muck around and learnt a little bit better, but some of these early shots are pretty dodgy. And yeah, you can see that big observational scanner on the top there. That's going to be like an optical telescope, which is aiming down at the surface. Optimally, you would use this about 300 kilometers altitude. I think that in this case, because of the technology level that I had at the time, the solar panels were a bit wimpy, and unfortunately KOS-1 was going to end up a failure because it did not have enough electrical charge to sustain the onboard scanning equipment. So yeah, a bit suboptimal in that regard, but we'll see. I think we'll see how we deal with that in a little bit. You can notice that I'm putting this into a polar orbit. This is standard practice for anyone who's played with ScanSat before, but if you haven't seen it before, the reason I'm going into a polar orbit, meaning that I'm going over the North and South Pole, 90-degree inclination, is that as the satellite orbits, the planet will rotate underneath it, and eventually, as the planet rotates and the satellite orbits, I will eventually be able to see 100% of the surface area of the planet. And yeah, I think that's about the time when I realized that the poor old probe didn't have enough electric charge. And here we can see that I've actually set up a second launch pad. This is one that I set up in Kerbal Construction Timer, but additionally I did also use Kerbal Constructs to physically build it, because I was a bit disappointed that I didn't see the two individual launch pads. When you're doing launches in Kerbal Construction Timer, your launches will actually damage the launch pad. You'll need to recondition them, taking up time and money and stuff like that to sort of, recondition after your launches. But having a second launch pad is useful if you need to do 2 quick launches back to back. I actually didn't need one, but I clicked the button and I was like, oh, well, I'll pay for it now. Might as well build it up in Kerbal Construction Timer. Kerbal Construct, sorry. But yeah, here we are in the research and development, looking at tech tree nodes. Ultimately, I decided to go for the electrics to improve our probes, making some more unmanned missions a little bit easier, and getting those much needed solar panels that were the cause of the failure for KOS-1 there. But yeah, as you can see, of course I'm going to start talking about it as it's gone off the screen, but all the nodes that were unlocked, the green nodes there, pretty much just a couple less than what I started with right at the start of the career save. Just like as I said earlier, I didn't want to be grinding out the early basic science to get some interesting parts. I wanted to get right into the interesting bits, and here we are. So yeah, KOS-1, failure. we have to add another observational satellite to our construction queue. Looking at some contracts now. We have one here to put a Kerbal on orbit for 30 days. And this is just coinciding with the launch of Aeros 2, which is a launch that I had set up already in the production. So what I did was actually ended up editing the contents of that launch to add a little bit more life support and try and stretch out the duration of the mission. Originally, it wasn't planned to go 30 days. As we fade across to the launch of Aeros 2. As I said, I was learning to use the camera tools mod, so I've thrown together a little montage of the launch for you. Hope you enjoy. So yeah, as I said, the original plan for Aeros 2 was a short orbital flight to just collect some higher science into the radiation belts above the sort of equatorial plane. But yes, we're going to be leaving poor old Valentina here. Her plan for her mission changed at the last minute. I'm absolutely certain that there will be no unintended consequences from this last minute change. But yes, we will be checking back in with Valentina a bit later on to see how she's going. Cool. Jumping straight back into it, we can see that we are doing another launch here, another vessel taking off. This one is I believe this is the radar version of the KOS, the KRS radar scanning satellite. Again, going into a polar orbit for the same reasons. The main difference between this one and the observational satellite is that it can work without the need for daylight to illuminate the surface of the planet, so it's generally going to take a little bit of a shorter time to complete its scans. I believe I've also accepted the contracts to do observational scans and radar scans of both the moon and Minmus, which we haven't actually gone and visited yet, but later in this episode we will be doing some moon flybys and some other exploration with some probes. Eventually gearing up to do some crude exploration of the surface of the moon. But yeah, I've got some sort of plans to do, you know, like maybe either a moon or a Minmus colony. Minmus obviously having lower gravity. It's not really a great candidate for long-term habitation with the effects of, you know, microgravity on the Kerbal body. Although maybe they are physiologically different and they don't need gravity as dependent on it as we would be. So yeah. It's an interesting kind of proposition because I obviously the moon is very kind of an analog for the real life moon, but Minmus is a great location. Obviously, I was saying that the lower gravity, it actually makes it easier to take off from land onto. So maybe with in the future, once I get these colonization things and have the sort of prerequisite tech to do in situ resource utilization, these bases are going to ultimately end up being a place where I actually use to manufacture rockets and launch from. So yeah, should be an interesting kind of approach to that whole thing. But we'll see how we go with that. And here we have the KRS-1 in a nice close polar orbit, swiftly fading across to the launch of the replacement vehicle for KOS-1. This is KOS-2. A couple of interesting design flaws I had with this vehicle, actually, which I have since fixed. But basically, they had good sort of stability in the atmosphere with the drag early on through the launch, but then later on, because of the short, stumpy second stage and that upper stage engine, which hasn't got a very huge gimbal capacity, it was very aerodynamically unstable and wanting to flip around. So that's why I've opted for kind of a higher, steeper launch trajectory here. Taking a little bit of a loss in delta V there with them kind of an unoptimized launch trajectory, but the trade-off is that it won't flip around and I waste more delta V. Obviously these missions are a little bit over-engineered. I don't really like to leave the margins fine on these. I like to have a little bit of fuel left over in these satellites once they're actually in orbit in case I need to make adjustments later down the track. Here we are again going up to another 300-kilometer altitude orbit, and the other design flaw that I had, as you can see, is that the fairings were very close to the sensitive mission critical solar panels that were the reason for the last failure. So yeah, making sure that in future I leave a little bit more room for the fairing. But I mean, obviously, like I was saying, because of the aerodynamic instability, I was trying to minimize the fairing drag as much as I could. Ferrum Aerospace is a mod that I'm running, which is making that voxel-based kind of simulation of the drag and fluid dynamics over the spacecraft. But yeah, here we are approaching our final periapsis burn to bring our apoapsis up and into a nice circularized 300-kilometer orbit. And we'll fade across to the next mission here. So, speaking of moon missions, we're now witnessing the launch of Luna 1. Original name, I know, for a lunar program, but yeah, I just wanted something kind of cool to kind of, tie it in. This is a bit of an unconventional launch vehicle. In the future, I do want to try and create a reusable launch vehicle, SpaceX style, where it will kind of land the lower stages and be completely reusable. I've got some design plans already underway for that, and we might see that in the next episode. But this one here, I hadn't fully tested it. And as I mentioned earlier, I am not doing any reverts for things that go wrong. And yeah. The fate of Luna 1, destroyed by aerodynamic stresses on the vehicle. Kind of flipped over into the broad side of the airstream and ripped the lower half of the rocket apart. So at this point I was kind of panicking, kind of was looking to see if I could salvage anything from this. Some of the music that I was listening to at the time, I think it was like some John Coltrane bebop or something, a very kind of apt description of the chaos. I realized I could very quickly spin the probe's top around, and with a little bit of a panic moment, me trying to scramble through MechJeb to find the surface velocity killer thing, I thought I might be able to save the expensive part of the top part of the mission, which is the probe core and some of the science equipment on top. And very quickly, just managed to save the very top half. Missed out on saving the engine and stuff like that, which is a very big expense, but there's a little bit there to salvage. And it's not too far from the KSC, so the crews will be running out there and picking bits up for the next few days. But Luna 1 was a complete failure. Other than the tiny little bit we recovered, the vehicle was destroyed. Yeah, which put me kind of uncomfortably worried about the next launch, following on to this one, Luna 2, which was going to be using the exact same launch vehicle. So very quickly went into the sort of production queue and made the changes to add some more aerodynamic stability to it. However, that wouldn't be all that was wrong with the launch vehicle, as we'll see in a moment. Quite a few design flaws on this one, as we watch Luna 2 fly above the beautiful clouds into orbit. I've realized that this video is starting to get a little bit sort of repetitive with the launches and stuff, and in future I'll probably cut out a lot of these launches, but especially for this first episode I just wanted to kind of showcase how I was going about doing these things, skipping through some of the maneuver node planning and stuff to get to the more interesting parts, which we see here. The fairing. Ultimately, as I said on the last vehicle, the fairing was a little bit too close to the components inside, ended up damaging one of the antennas, and one of the solar panels was completely destroyed. Fortunately, with a little bit of redundancy built into the mission and having 3 solar panels, which was probably a little bit overkill, the loss of that solar panel there wasn't going to have too much of an impact on the mission. The antenna I was a little bit worried about. We'll see how we kind of go with that as we do a maneuver plan. Plotting out the maneuver node here, what I was kind of aiming for was something akin to a free return trajectory, which isn't entirely possible within the stock Kerbal Space Program. I know it's possible with mods like Principia, which add n-body sort of orbital simulation. But this sort of high orbit that I ultimately ended up going for was for a couple of reasons. The main one being that I just lost the antenna, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to maintain connection with the probe if I put it all the way out to the moon. So I wanted to kind of ensure that it would return to a usable altitude where I could maintain communication with it. But further to that, I actually had accepted a contract to do a return of science from space near the moon, and this would require me to basically directly return a craft from lunar orbit. And that was something that was actually planned into the Luna 2 mission. So it's kind of similar to the real-life Luna 3 mission, where they sent the probe out and then used the free return trajectory to get it down low, close to the Earth, so that they could actually communicate with it with radio and download the images that it had taken. I overcooked the burn a little bit, and yeah, you can see that I managed to get that periapsis nice and low in the atmosphere. So yeah, the probe itself's got heat shield and parachutes, and it's designed to land after the after the successful lunar flyby. I hope you guys are enjoying the video so far. I'm kind of new to this whole video editing thing, and this is actually one of the reasons why I bit the bullet and did this series, is because I wanted to stretch myself, and you know, been talking about doing it for a while, so I wanted to finally force myself to learn how to actually use like video editing software. I don't think I'm very good at the commentary side of things yet, but I'm working on improving it over time. If you guys have any tips or anything like that, I'd love to hear them. I think that kind of as I do more episodes, the quality of the videos as well will get better. You know, I'm still sort of just figuring things out. I also find that I just kind of need to hit render and upload this video, because otherwise the video would never come out. I'm something of a ridiculous perfectionist when it comes to these sort of stuff. And kind of I am just doing this whole thing for fun, you know, because I think it's just the thing that I've realized is that this is the type of content that I would love to watch on YouTube, but outside of the obvious legends, Scott Manley's Interstellar Quest, especially BD Penguin's KSP Endurance and Beyond Kerbal, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way. There isn't a lot of kind of long-term KSP careers that are kind of edited in this style, and I wanted to try my hand at one just for fun, really. I am aiming to kind of go forward and release more of these videos, aiming to do Mondays, as many Mondays as possible. Doesn't necessarily mean every Monday. I'm quite busy. I have a bad habit of putting a lot of stuff on my plate, and you know, I'm still studying, finishing off my degree, professional musician. I'm touring around Australia twice this year. Got another tour coming up later this year, so there might be a big kind of lapse in the videos for a little bit. No Mondays while I'm away and stuff like that, but I'm hoping to kind of, you know, just as I'm feeling ready and as I find the time, just keep these videos coming out. And I hope that that's something that you guys are interested in. If you are, please, I would implore you to hit the subscribe button and kind of ring the bell for any notifications that come out. This channel will just entirely be focused on continuing this series for now. And maybe in the future I'll branch out if it has a little bit of success or a little bit of fun. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I realized I did just yap over the whole of the landing of Luna 2. But coming back to the Space Center, I realized something a little bit worrying. Valentina is at 65% stress on her kind of habitation meter. I'm sure she'll be right. I mean, we're about 15 days into her mission, and she's got another 15 to go, so yeah. Either way, that's going to have to be a problem for the next episode, because I'm going to end it here. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you sticking with the video for this long. If you've enjoyed it, please leave a like, and keep an eye out for the next one. Peace.